Multi-tracking guitars is an age-old studio trick that allows us to build up our guitars to get that big, bold, and wide sound, especially in a rock context where we layer a bunch of electric guitars, pan them left and right, and just create that really big rock sound. But what about acoustic guitars? Now, I'm not talking about an acoustic part that accompanies an electric part. I'm talking about utilizing an acoustic guitar as part of our electric guitar tone just to create one big sound. How would that work? Well, that's what I'm talking about today. Why don't you join me? For me, one of the best parts about being a guitar player in a studio environment is the ability to create and shape sounds. Rarely when I'm recording electric guitars am I looking for a quintessential Marshall tone or a Fender tone. It's funny, the word tone is used to describe sort of the characteristics of a guitar sound that's usually a combination of a particular guitar and pickups, perhaps pedals into an amplifier. It's kind of a strange word if you think about it and can get confusing, but we utilize the word tone to describe a particular sound. So when I'm shaping tone, especially here in the studio environment, I like to bring together different pieces and layer the sound to come up with something a little more unique. Now, if you look at the amplifiers that I have in my studio, there's one thing that they all have in common, and they're all multiple channels. So this gives me a lot of different varieties. Some of them are 2-channel, some of them are 4-channel. You know, they have built-in boosts or mid-boosts, things like that. You've got EQs. You can take pedals and push it into the amplifiers to come up with all sorts of different sounds. And I use those as sort of colors that I like to blend together to come up with one sound instead of, like I said, coming up with a signature tone that we've heard, 1,000 times before. And to me, that's the fun of recording in a studio. Now, one of my favorite things to do, even in creating a big rock sound, is to use perhaps, let's say, a high gain tone, maybe using the ENGL, for example, and then recording the parts again with a cleaner sound, maybe using the humbucker for the heavier tone, and then using like a Tele style guitar with a really clean chimey tone, and blend them together with that chimey tone just sitting on top of the distorted sound. It brings a bit of articulation and definition into the chords where sometimes we can't really hear the individual notes, but it's a good way to bring that back and again, create something unique. So in the spirit of that, I wanted to try that with an acoustic guitar. Same idea where I'm going to play the same parts on the acoustic. We're not playing a separate part. This is going to be part of the electric guitar tone. We're just going to use an acoustic guitar. So I'm going to share the results of my experiment, give you some strategies so maybe you can employ something like this in your own studio. So why don't we start off by listening to the finished tone, and then I'll break it all down for you. So what's most important to remember with this technique is that we want that acoustic guitar to be part of the electric guitar. That means we have to approach the recording with the acoustic guitar the same as the electric. So, this is a simple track, but I worked out my parts on the electric guitar, and then I played them again, replicated exactly or as close as I could on the acoustic guitar. I didn't play it differently because let's face it, when we pick up an acoustic guitar, we tend to want to do something different, maybe strum a little bit more. So I worked out the parts, played it exactly the same on the acoustic guitar. Now, of course, we could create a different part, maybe different voicings, a slightly different rhythm that, complements the electric guitar. I'm actually going to show you a comparison of the two, but the idea for this video is I want to utilize that acoustic guitar as part of the electric guitar. So the discipline is going to be on how we track because we want to play it exactly the same. If we just sort of push through a chord or if we sort of rake a chord, we want to do the same thing on the acoustic as we do on the electric guitars. All right, so let's break this down. So the meat of this tone is actually coming from my ENGL Powerball II. I'm using channel 3, that's one of the two high gain channels. I'm using my Howard Roberts. It's more of a classic style humbucking pickup in the bridge position. So I didn't go full bore on the high gain. I sort of brought it back a little bit, but it's still a big distorted sound. I double tracked that, so each part is identical. I use the same pickup. I use the same setting on the amp. Only the real difference is I use the same Cab IR plugin. I actually use the Miko 2 Cab IR plugin. Actually, I did a whole video about that. I'll link that down below if you want more information about that. But I use 2 Cab IR settings, so there's slight variations between the two sides and sort of minor EQ differences, which I'll talk about a bit more in a second. So let's listen to the meat of that tone, the Howard into the ENGL Powerball II. So the next part of that is the acoustic guitar. So I use my Taylor acoustic, and I actually tried recording it with the internal pickup, and I actually don't like the way an acoustic guitar sounds with internal pickups, but I thought in this case it might actually work. I actually found that it didn't. So actually I just recorded it with this condenser mic. This is an Audio-Technica AT2050. I placed it around the 12th fret, maybe about 6 inches or so, 6 to 8 inches away from the guitar. And I did 2 takes, played it as close to the same as I could in both takes. Again, I panned those left and right, and I processed those pretty similar. I'll talk about the processing in a second, but let's take a listen to that. So the first question will be why don't I just play the acoustic guitar once and just copy it and pan it left and right? Okay, we get it with the electric guitars. We've got that big sound. We double tracked it. But the acoustic guitar really is just a texture that's sitting on top. Well, if you look at this stereo spectrum, I mean, we're really just working with 2 speakers and everything is coming out of those speakers. So that feeling of width is really just an illusion, right? Because anything that's in the middle, it almost feels like it's coming out of your computer monitor, right? Well, there's no speaker there, but it's really just an illusion. Now, the mids, if you look at it as in mids and sides, the middle is really the sum of the sides. So if you just copy that acoustic guitar track and put it on the left and right side, if you listen to it, it's going to force everything into the middle because there's no differences between the two, and that illusion is that it's coming out of the middle. Now, if you double track it, the differences are very subtle. That's the human quality, but that's what makes it interesting. Now, you may not be able to pick it apart and understand exactly what the differences are, but there are differences and your ear can hear that. So when you're listening to it, your ear is feeling those 2 instruments in the left and right speakers, giving that illusion of width. So let me show that to you. I'll play it, the acoustic guitars in solo, and we're going to switch between duplicating and actually recording it twice, and you can hear the difference. So it's very clearly different when we do double track it. It just suddenly feels so much wider. So now in the context of this big tone that I'm trying to create, if I blend a duplicated acoustic guitar track, it's going to force that acoustic guitar into the middle, and that's exactly what I don't want. Now, if you want that effect and you want it in the middle, just record it once and pan it to the center. You don't need to record it twice. But in this case, I want to double track it because I want to feel it really wide. So it's really important that you record it twice and nail it as close as you can because the timing obviously is critical in really selling this effect. So the last part of all of this is bringing all of the guitars together. And how we do that is really going to depend on the needs of the track, depends what you've recorded. Now, you could take all 4 of them. We've got 2 electric guitars. Let's pan those left and right. 2 acoustic guitars. We're going to pan those left and right. We can take that whole concoction and we can bus that, and then we can process that all as one guitar. That's totally doable. If it gets you where you need to be, then certainly that will work. Now, depending on the acoustic guitar specifically, because I want to be able to blend that in and get out of that acoustic guitar what I want, I found that I needed to sort of do a little bit of pre-processing before I grouped everything. Now, we're definitely going to group everything at the end and mix it as one instrument. So let's start off with the electric guitars. I already talked about the cab IRs. I'm using the Miko 2. The 2 guitars, like I said, recorded with the Howard into the high gain channel of the ENGL Powerball II. Same pickup, same everything. I'm just using 2 different cab IR settings, just so there's a little bit more variation on the left and right. You can use 2 guitars. You can use 2 different pickups if you want to change it up a little bit. You can get a lot of great results doing that. I kept it simple for this example. But the only other pre-processing I'm doing, I like to use this Neve channel strip that's from Plugin Alliance. It's just I have a couple of settings that I typically use. I have one for the left and one for the right. And this is sort of before I hear it in the mix. I'm working in solo and I'm just crafting, that tone, just sort of the initial tone. I'm not really worried about how it sounds like in the mix, just basically what I'm starting with. So I do that on the left and the right. So let's take a quick listen again to just the electric guitars. So the objective when I was pre-processing the acoustic guitars was really to get the acoustics working with the electric guitars. Now we're talking about sort of the package of guitars in solo. We're not working in the mix just yet. The idea is I just want to feel the acoustic guitar sitting on top of the electric guitar just to bring some definition in the chords, the individual notes, maybe a little bit of openness. If I was mixing an acoustic guitar on its own, there'd be different considerations. You know, that full-bodied acoustic sound just doesn't apply in this case because I feel that bottom end is just kind of going to get in the way of the electric guitars. So I took a little bit of a different approach. So my main focus here, the first stage, I used a channel strip. This is actually IK Multimedia's British channel. I guess this is their SSL emulation. And there's a little bit of a boost around 250, not too much. But again, my main focus was sort of more in the mid-range. At around 1.9K, I did a considerable lift there. And then at 6K as well. This applies actually to the left and right channel. I'm just showing you one example here. Now, like I said, I'm doing this while I'm listening to the electric guitars at the same time. So just getting them to sit nicely on top. As I mentioned, later on, we're going to package all of this up into a bus and I'll do a final processing to get that into the mix. But while listening to everything in the mix, once I did this processing, I felt it needed a little bit more. So I actually threw a Pro Q3 on after that. I didn't want to undo what I had done with the channel strip because it was sounding pretty good. I did a high pass around 135 hertz and I gave it a little extra lift around 3.2K. That seemed to be a little boost, just got it sitting where I wanted it to sit. So why don't we take a listen to the mix, and I'm going to turn the acoustic guitar processing on and off so you can see what it's doing. So in solo, you can already hear what it's bringing to the table. Of course, that balance between the acoustic and the electric, ultimately you're going to make that decision once you're in mix, but rough it together, get it sort of working together. And then once you're in the mix, you can actually tweak the balance between the acoustic and the electric guitars. So the last stage is once I'm happy with the blend of those two groupings of guitars, is I bus all of them together where I'm going to do the final processing and get it to fit into the mix. It was just, too much work to mix 4 different guitars individually into your mix. So get them working together, and then now you can treat it as one instrument. So all I've done really here is I use an opto compressor, also from IK Multimedia here. And if you look at it, there's very, very minimal gain reduction here. Just basically this is glue, just gluing everything together. I mean, the dynamics on the electric versus the acoustic are very, very different. So I just wanted to glue that together just a little bit. Didn't want to add too much color or anything to it, so I'm using a pretty transparent compressor. And then the last stage of that is just another EQ. Now, if you look at the curve here, this is pretty typical of a curve that I would apply to most of my electric guitars in getting a guitar to sit in the mix. We have a typical cut at around 90 hertz, and then also at 10K. Somewhere around 1K to 2K, I'm often looking to do a cut there. You'll often get some harshness in an electric guitar around there. But I also use that space. I like a really gritty bass guitar, so I'll sort of play that space, pull the guitars down, fit the bass in that space. I find that works really well. And then somewhere near the low end of the guitar, around 200, 220, somewhere there, do a little bit of lift. Again, that's where you get the meat and potatoes of the guitar. And then for a little bit of a top end and a little definition, I've got a little boost here around 4.2K. Again, this is going to be something that you're going to have to figure out on your end, but this is a typical curve, something similar that you'll see when processing guitars. The last step was to send the guitar bus to a reverb. I found affecting the whole group through one reverb made the most sense. I also EQ'd my reverb with a high pass and a lift at about 2.5K. All right, let's take one last listen to the entire concoction. I'm going to start off by playing the whole mix with just the electric guitars, and then I'll introduce the acoustic guitars. I'll go back and forth just so we can hear the effect of the acoustic guitars on our electric guitar tone. Well, I really, really like that tone. I think it's a fresh approach to creating guitar tone. Again, just experimenting and coming up with different sounds, one of my favorite things to do. But at the very least, I hope it's planted some seeds. You can look around your studio, see what you've got available. You can use amps, you can use plugins, you can use modelers, as long as you got an acoustic guitar floating around, and see what you can come up with. Well, there you have it. I certainly hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're doing something similar, I would love to hear from you. Perhaps you can join the conversation and let us know some thoughts and tips in the comment section. If you do have any questions at all, any other thoughts, that's what the comment section is for. Always happy to hear from you. But if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you really want to support this channel, check out the description. There's all sorts of ways you can do that. I've got affiliate links. Clicking on those links doesn't cost you anything extra, but if you do end up buying something, it kicks a little bit back to the studio and helps me continue making content just like this, and I do appreciate the support. I'm also on Patreon if you want direct access to me. I've got merch. All in the description. Every little bit helps, and I appreciate that. But the easiest way to support this channel is simply to watch another video. I've got one waiting for you right here. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. And I look forward to seeing you again in another video.